All right, everyone, welcome to the debut episode of the podcast known as Camp Elasticity. I'm your host. My name is Zack, Kopp. I'll have a few guests for you today. I've got Roseanna Frechette from Darko, Denver artist for Rent Control, and Khiri Lee, a zine surf from Boulder. The zine is called 52 Feathers, and she's got some more things to talk about too. We're going to go into the opening conversation here with Roseanna Frechette.
Hey.
Tell us what's new with Darko.
Oh, Darko. Well, Darko was founded in, already we're 3 years old, 16, 17, going on 4 years old. So we're coming a little bit out of our terrible twos and into our full-blown toddler. Soon we'll be, well, actually, what's happening with Darko is all the work that we've done for 3 years now of exploring the issues of what we call attainable space for all,
Right.
in which to live, work, create, express, and gather. That's our mission.
Gotta have all
because,
those.
well, yeah, right? Because we know that without those 5 things, no culture of any kind is going to thrive.
Yeah,
Right.
and what point is it living without those things?
We could be zombies if all we're doing is working our butts off and, then go home and collapse only to get up the next day and do it again.
Sure.
So
That's what a
attainable
lot of people are doing.
exactly, and because the cost of living is so very challenging right now, and so it's become a very difficult time. And with Denver Artists for Rent Control, we started out over a very great concern with what might become of our independent art culture in a town that was experiencing suddenly, it'll be 4 years now coming up in February, an extreme boom, like a mushroom explosion of like immediate growth, just knocking things down, houses going down, friends of mine losing their leases when a landlord is selling the property so it can be redeveloped. And, we're just watching parking lots turn into monolithic, outrageously outnumbering the block in terms of houses and people, with just like hundreds and hundreds of apartments in one little corner,
They
like over
paved
here
paradise.
yeah. So anyway, so you guys know what I'm talking about, and everybody gets it, and it's been going on for a while. It hasn't really slowed down. What's happened is we've adapted. Meanwhile, there's a massive housing crisis. So when Denver Artists for Rent Control's mission started out as a concern over our own, art community, I mean, literally, I as the founder was just kind of sitting in my house one day, and I even felt sort of protected because I had a really good situation that I could afford that seemed it was going to last quite a while. It didn't, but I thought that then I wasn't really founding the organization so much for my own needs, but I could see my friends becoming desperately homeless, basically, or, right? You
Yeah.
saw that too a lot, right, Keely?
I have a lot of friends who live in crazy situations, like,
Mm-hmm.
8 people in a suburban home, commuting a long way to get to where their jobs are in the city, working as a barista and as an artist, or as a computer programmer and as a dancer.
Right.
Do you also work with organizations? Because I know in Boulder with the boom, a lot of the studio spaces, gallery spaces, dance spaces are being torn down
Yes.
and turned into homes that no one is living in.
Right.
I don't know as much about Darko, if it's just for individual concerns or for organizational concerns as well.
It's organizational, and we're allied with other organizations, but we learned really quickly that it's a very complicated, massive range of issues that we're talking about if we're interested in protecting our bohemian art culture and independent underground of all the arts, because this whole region is very, very artistic, and so many different forms of expression. We've got it all. We've got the rock bands, the film, the spoken word, the literary arts, the poetry.
There's a growing immersive
Dance.
theater group coming in, and now Meow
Theater.
Wolf is showing up here, and so that's bringing installation and immersive art and
So,
things like that.
I mean, we generate a lot of revenue because of that too, for the community, the greater community. But there's concern. So anyway, we went from being concerned about that, but then exploring the issues of attainable space and the idea of outrageously escalating rents for everything from an apartment to a parking spot and a practice space. And, you know, I mean, we wouldn't be sitting here right now recording this podcast if these fabulous guys that own and are running Mutiny Information Cafe didn't situate themselves here and work it out so they could be here, you know?
Yeah, so I want to give a shout out to Mutiny Information Cafe, Jim Norris, Matt McGessie, Doug on the Wheels of Steel today. Don't know his
Wonderful
last name.
place. Thank you so much.
He's a good
This
whistler.
is great.
And we are literally in
Welcome.
the Bohemian Underground right now because we are down here, you know,
It's true.
subterranean, down
Yeah,
in the
listening to
basement
the
of this
creaks of the
really-
footsteps above us.
Right, it's so cool. We're surrounded by books and really awesome. There's an awesome tapestry of Elvis facing me right now, and all the
Alien
little
with
lamps and
crossed
stuff.
swords.
This is what, you know, Denver has always been known for being very characteristic and quaint, you know, and we were concerned when we founded Denver Artists for Rent Control that it wasn't just about rent and it wasn't just about artists, but the concern was preserving a culture that has quality and character and charisma, and that's sort of edgy and a little gritty and definitely
Not all just quartz countertops and brass mid-century furniture.
yeah, you know, and
Which
what
has a
we
place
see
too.
happening is some of the really cool stuff, like the Gypsy House Cafe that was on 13th over there in
Capitol
City,
Hill
not
and
City Park area.
Congress. I don't know what it's called either. Is it Congress Park? I don't
No,
know.
Cheeseman Park.
Oh, yes.
Cheeseman Park. Yeah, we have so many great parks. Well, Gypsy House, to their credit, they now have relocated on South Broadway, and they're equally wonderful. Like, they found a spot to be. It took a while. They had to get through that, and that's the thing that we're seeing is that our community is adapting. In the meantime, this range of issues is grand. So to answer your question, you know, a little more specifically, we learned that as an organization, we can't take on too much. Like, we can't be figuring out all the different ways that the spaces themselves could continue to be available to the community. We couldn't figure out all the various shapes and forms of everything that there is to deal with here. But what we could do, and with affordable housing too, and all the formulas that go with that, what we could do is we could show up at City Council and Congress to voice our concerns. We could host events where people can come, and we can have a Facebook page where people can share information and raise awareness, but we're taking actions. But we've zoomed in on the housing crisis.
Great.
Because if we can't live in a town because there's literally not a roof over our heads, how do we even, like,
Right. It's
make
like
our art? How do-
Maslow's pyramid of needs, right? Like food, housing, water is at the bottom, and then
Right.
creation of art is at the very top. And it's like, all right, you have to do it in order. It's very hard to do it in a different.
Exactly.
system.
So that's why when we say, you know, we need space in which to live, work, create, express, and gather, it's like we call out live first and work next and create, express. But we've got to gather, you know? I mean, a community needs to be able to gather also. And human beings tend to gather in warm spaces. You know, we tend to like ambient environments where we can feel settled and comfortable. So there's a lot there to be concerned about. And, you know, it's all spelled out, all the actions that we take at our website, denverartistsforrentcontrol.com.
Okay.
It was .org until we
You went official.
our auto repay went sort of into a zone where we didn't realize that the auto repay had actually expired. This very
Oh.
corporate thing happened
oh, no,
where
I've had that
it
happen.
was
So you
down
lost
for a
the
month.
name?
Someone came and stole the name so they could try to sell it back to us. Can you imagine that?
wow.
So anyway, we became a .com, but that's okay because it's a little more visibility. Either way, we've got that platform and we have brochures and Facebook and all to help people understand the many ways that they can be involved with us and what it is that we're trying to do. But mostly, you know, right now we're really focused on the fact that there is a statute in Colorado that bans rent control being set by municipalities for housing, and it's been there since 1981. There's a whole story there. I could talk, you know, this whole hour, and I don't want to take up all of our time explaining all of that. But just to let you know that The goal with us and the coalition that we're a part of, which includes Colorado Homes for All also, is to help repeal that ban on municipalities taking action in their own communities to stabilize rent. And so, in essence, the cities have their wrists tied. And we've always heard that they can't really do a whole lot to help us in a really wide sweeping way from having rents do something like escalate 100% overnight, which is not an exaggeration in some cases that we've been seeing in recent years. So that's the thing that you can look forward to hearing a lot about in this next congressional season. We're getting a strategy together. We had Senator Julie Gonzalez.
Strategery.
She sponsored. What's that?
Strategery.
Yeah.
Yeah, George Bush coined that one.
Oh, thank you.
Strategy, strategery.
It's you gotta approach, when it comes to legislative change, it takes a lot of patience, a lot of work, a lot of showing up, a lot of hanging in there and hanging in there and hanging in there. So when we get frustrated, we just have to remember it took 120 years for women to get the vote, and if they had given up halfway to it, it never would have happened. So it isn't going to take us that long to repeal that statute that bans rent control being set for housing, because it's a national and a global crisis right now. And so there's a lot of attention on it. 35 states are dealing with this. Well, they're not all dealing with it, but 35 states have at least some prohibitions on rent control.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's not just us, and that's why this thought, when I started Denver Artists for Rent Control, this thought came into my head, and I think you can relate, that when worried individual concern becomes confident community action, an entire energy field can change.
I like it.
I love that.
So that was the crystallized thought that got me to say, don't sit here and be depressed while you're watching your friends have to get in their car and move away and so forth, and wondering what's going to become of you and your town that you love so much.
That's a good one.
Take action. And do it as a collective. Get the community in there with you, and then become a greater coalition, and we can make things happen. And so we are. And Jared Polis signed 5 renters' rights bills into law after our last congressional season.
Wow.
And one of them has to do with holding landlords more accountable than ever over safe and healthy. It's a Safe and Healthy Homes Act. So over those kinds of issues where, if you're not even able to be in your apartment, they're responsible for that, for things that might be hurting you. They have to take care of it, and they have to take care of you while they're taking care of it. And it's really tightened up on that score, people should know. Getting a lot more help with evictions, because trumped up evictions, landlords could trump up an eviction so they get you out of there so that they can get the next person in right away and raise the rent.
Yeah, I just had a whole housing debacle thing where I had misinformation. They wanted to raise my rent, and I thought I was covered, and I wasn't. And then there were fees and all this stuff, and I just couldn't figure out how to navigate my way around it, and it ended up being very expensive. And
it's a very expensive thing. It's so expensive,
and I was like,
it's very, very prohibitive, and so people really do break down, and some people end up in really dire straits. And I mean, if you have an eviction on your record right now, that can cause you to not be able to rent again. It stays on a record, so things like that we're very concerned about, and we have a lot of numbers. So you'll be hearing about it, and you can jump in there with us when Congress starts up again in January. And I'm not sure what bill will be introduced, if it'll be the same bill that was introduced last year, just allowing municipalities to stabilize rent. It was pretty simple. And it actually, good news, passed the first state Senate committee hearing.
All right.
It passed.
Good news.
So I was there. I gave testimony. That's what I do. I go. Anybody can go. You can go. You can give testimony at any bill hearing that you want to.
Yeah, I've been. I was active, not politically, but in places I wanted to change by working with nonprofits and teaching kids and doing that in the past couple of years. I've been all right, I think it's time to get more political. Yeah. And the biggest advice I got was just show up. Go to the hearings, go to the spaces, go to the
and
discussions.
there's this concept that a lot of people have where they feel like their voice doesn't count because they're just one person. But
Right.
that's false thinking when you consider if everybody felt that way, then nothing would get done, you
Right.
know? So, and I really had wanted to say too that just that, I really wanted to dedicate being here today to just thanking all my fellow artists and activists and creatives of any kind
All right, you're welcome.
that are doing the challenging work of holding ground for humanity. Because, that's what it's going to take, is for everybody to just have a humanitarian spirit, as in really wanting to do the best thing for the collective community, for all,
Right. Yeah.
to take care of one another,
Right.
So I really think that that's a very important thing, that we acknowledge one another in that, and that we just remember that it's always been a job of the artist to reflect back a community to itself. It's been one of the jobs of an artist. I mean, it's not just about having a creative thought or a creative urge and just making something pretty. That's nice. That's valid,
Yeah.
of course. Or just, take a photograph because you see something and you just so much want to capture it. But also to pay attention to what's going on around us and have a willingness to make at least some of our art a reflection back to our community of what we see.
Right.
Yeah. I really struggle with that point as an artist, because I want to create pieces of work that feel something or mean something or speak to an issue in the community that I care about. And the pieces of art that I sell the most frequently are the pieces that are like pretty and go well with interior design. Maybe don't have a
Right.
deeper meaning. I just sold this painting, which I really love. But it was just of a deer. It was just sort of a throwaway piece that I did for fun. And a friend of mine was like, "Oh my God, I have to have this. It's a deer. And I love deer."
Well,
And that was great. But I'm so happy that she resonated with that piece for whatever reason. But there's no money in a piece of art. Or I wouldn't say there's
No,
no
like
money. It's
artistic
harder to
satisfaction.
find a lot of quick cash or, to
for a-
pay a living for a piece that isn't like a portrait of someone's cat, right?
that's the thing. It's like, some of us are the ones that would go and we would buy the most interesting, edgy, intriguing, makes you really think and feel piece of art that we can find. Like a lot of what they have here at Mutiny Information Cafe. I have
I
wanted
saw
to
a
buy
piece.
so many pieces here.
I think I might leave with a
That
piece
just
of art.
really made me think. But it's nice too to help people just enjoy their homes, with what we create. But I really do feel that this is the time. I mean, we've crossed over. I guess it's all we go through stages as humanity, where it becomes extremely essential for all human beings to become activists. I mean, if you don't show up to do what you can to protect what you love, to protect your own actual basic needs. I mean, it's no longer that we can just vote people into office, and they're paid servants of us, by the way.
Right.
You know,
But has anyone had faith in that for like at least 50 years? Has anyone really had faith that they are doing anything in our benefit?
some of them are.
The
And-
elected officials?
Yeah, some of them are. And so that's why, for instance, when Julie Gonzalez, state senator of Colorado, Julie Gonzalez, when she approached me at one of the Denver Artists for Rent Control functions, and the first thing she said was, if I'm elected, one of the very first things I will do is get behind repealing that statute that
Oh,
bans
that's
rent
great.
control. And this was at a time when that statute was like the elephant in the room. I couldn't believe it. We were in a full-blown housing crisis, and
I
I'm
remember
going
you
to...
using that phrase.
Yeah, traumatic, tragic, happening now, immediate housing crisis.
Right.
And nobody wants to talk about this crazy statute that's been there that bans municipalities from setting any kind of rent stabilization policies because it keeps getting swept into that banned position, So anyway, we know where it's this country's built on capitalism, and we know that politics is a kind of a business of its own, obviously, But yeah, there are a lot of really great policymakers
All
out
right.
there.
I'm sorry.
And we have a really great city council for Denver right now. So if we need to stay on top of that one. And they and for Boulder, I know you have really great city council people in Boulder too.
Yeah,
a few of them.
and there seems to be like new people coming into the story all the time who are activated and interested in what's going on, and some of the older voices are stepping. New turns are happening in terms of
Yeah.
diversity and.
I was wondering if I could read something to you too, that and see what you think about this, because I found this in my notes. Now it's gotten to the point where Darko's been going for so long that I have like a whole bin of like different binders and notes and research, because the research keeps happening, and I'm trying to stay on top of it all the time. But as I said, right now, really focused on that, getting the permission from municipalities, cities, to be able to stabilize the rent crisis, the outrageously escalating rents. There's also all the other stuff we have to pay attention to, though, which is the part about irresponsible growth and reckless development. So that's not happening everywhere. Some of the development we're seeing is great. It's just that some of it looks very ill-planned, and so we have to keep an eye on that, too, and speak out about that. But I want to take this back to the art thing.
Right.
We're all three artists, and this is a very great podcast for artists to listen to. And back when the Rhinoceropolis was closed over the whole DIY
John Gross,
scare,
by the way, a future guest.
wonderful,
John Gross.
wonderful person. Yeah, I
I
love
don't know
hearing
what
him
you'd call him,
talk.
proprietor, landlord of Rhinoceropolis.
Yeah, one of the founders
art
of that
space slash
project.
living
And then they
space.
got it reopened. They went
And
through a
it's been
whole...
reopened partly with the help of Meow Wolf.
And with that Safe DIY Spaces program that Denver was the first to have in the whole nation, there have been some pros to that, and the art community worked together with the city to have that. It's I don't even want to go there because it's a bit challenging to even talk about that program for me, but in a way it's been a good thing. With the help of the art community, and it's nice that John got that reopened. That
Yes,
space. Really
absolutely.
great, really great. So, this article came out when the closure happened after the ghost ship fire in San Francisco, because this is the thing, and Denver's always been a really great DIY town. Like, we've always been able to, artists could find a space to do it yourself, and you could find it, but it used to be there were a lot more spaces that weren't so risky to be in. But that you could just that were being taken care of by landlords already and were up to code, and that you could afford them.
Right, warehouse
They
spaces.
were attainable financially.
Yeah.
Because there was just a lot more available, than what we see now. So, but the Denver Post put this article out there in December of 2016, and I'm just going to read 2 paragraphs from this. And the name of the article was, "In Light of Rhinoceropolis Closure, Will Denver Do the Right Thing for Its Creative Class?" We tend to think of artists as something other than regular people, sometimes superhuman because of their talent, and other times less than human and undeserving of the kind of wages that would let them afford a decent place to live, to raise their families, and to make all that cool stuff. Artists are supposed to suffer, the thinking goes, and if they don't like the bohemian lifestyle, they should get a real job. The two ideas are in conflict, and so we go into a bit of denial, pretending we can have it both ways. We declare our passion for art, brag about how creative our city is, and tout the cultural sector's $500 million impact on the region's economy each year. At the same time, we do little to provide individual artists with the resources needed to survive in a growing metropolis.
Wow.
Yeah.
He goes on to say Denver has boomed over the past decade, This is a boom town. It will boom, but I have
I
never...
can remember when I moved here in '83, they were worried about the Californians were moving here.
I know.
And it started again in like 2011 or whenever it was that they legalized pot. Maybe 2014.
Right. So he's like, the city's bigger, richer, more interesting than ever. Public and private sector investment is through the roof, and neglected neighborhoods are springing back to life. And in all of this, artists have been left behind. But we won't be left behind because we're very, very resourceful.
That's right.
We're tenacious. We have stamina. We know how to adapt. It all goes with the creative process of being an artist in the first place.
Yeah, we know how to deal with failure, things like that.
We're passionate. And so I'm proud of our community. We have adapted, but I'm really hoping that we continue to keep an eye on our policymakers and see about cutting out that swath that is, and making sure, let's get a city planner, Denver. You know, I mean, now we have a new housing, quote unquote, housing department, and I think it's interesting that the acronym is HOST.
Yeah, you wanted to say something about that. It went from
Housing
hope to
Stability Host. But I'm like, okay, well, that sounds kind of fancy schmancy, cotton candy, fun little host, you know? And I'm thinking, why couldn't we just call it the Department of Housing is a Human Right?
Har. Har.
There is no acronym that goes with that.
Yeah.
But
It's
the
hard to
thing is,
pronounce.
or let's go ahead and buy up the 20,000 vacant luxury apartments roundabout. That was the figure in March, so I'm not sure where that stands now. But March of this year, we had recently developed 20,000 new units that are still vacant. I mean, we've developed a whole lot more than that. That's not all vacant, but that's enough to house the homeless population of the whole state of Colorado and still have, 10,000 units left over. But maybe we could buy up, this is my joke, maybe the new department could buy up all those luxury spaces and turn them into a public housing chain and call it Host.
Didn't Salt Lake City
good
do
idea.
something along those lines?
Yeah.
Where they had a big program and they housed a bunch of their homeless.
Yeah.
They were like, you can go to rehab or you can get a job, and a lot of the people were like, great, I need support, I'll do it. Like,
Yeah.
and they cleaned up their parks and their
Yeah.
cities. I was just there visiting a friend.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff going on. And some of it is in Denver. We do actually have some really good things going on for
Great.
our homeless population. But we also have an issue with treating people that are actually on the street right now, treating them very badly, and the sweeps and all that, especially in this kind of weather. And so that was just, that was just brought to action in a federal lawsuit. And so the federal judge ruled to approve a class action settlement just recently, just in September. And so now federally it's illegal. In the state of Colorado, it wasn't a Colorado court. It wasn't our Colorado court. It was in Colorado, the federal court, that says that you cannot take people's property without written notice attached to the property 48 hours in advance.
That passed?
Mm-hmm. You cannot take people's property at a large encampment without a written notice 7 days in advance. And you cannot trash any property that is defined as property in the settlement, but rather you must store it for 60 days.
All right.
So but that doesn't mean they're going to abide by that law.
Yeah.
We're still going to have to keep showing up and
Nominal progress.
tussling with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so those are all good. There's some really good things that are taking place. And I do believe that there's a huge, I know because we're a part of it, there's just a huge population of artists and humanitarians and advocates and activists and coalitions. And it's a very, very thriving time for people to know and feel that they can actually take action. And it can actually get somewhere.
All right. Well, speaking of artists and speaking of the Pyramid of Needs, what's the order on that? It's live, feel, I don't know the order, but I don't think I've got it in the correct order yet either, because I'm always trying to create art that is more like evocative of experience and like transcendental, and maybe it's more my spiritual path that I'm on when I'm writing or creating art.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm resistant of writing about Donald Trump or like whatever boring thing is happening in material reality.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that that's being in denial.
No.
I think it's just being strange, just being peculiar of purpose and intent, perhaps.
But here you are putting a podcast together, and this is part of your artistic
Good
urge.
point. Yeah.
And you're willing to open this space up for people to talk about anything and everything.
I would rather be the facilitator of others in this. Module.
Yeah, it's not a narcissistic project for you. You didn't do this so you could become a star. You did this so that you could you could open up a platform for many voices to engage in conversation that's meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another way of reflecting your community back to itself.
And what I'm trying to do as a creative type right now is find a way to make that remunerative, to make art pay for a little bit of my other needs in my pyramid. And one of the ideas that I'm interested in is Patreon, a site where you can set up your own page asking for donations and support for whatever your creative project is at the time. And I know Khiri has some experience with Patreon.
Oh,
and
let's
she's
talk
a
about
self-made creative herself. And let's turn the mic over to her and let
I
her
want to
tell
hear
us
about
about
that.
her experience.
That's another way of sharing attainable space.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Virtual space, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Thank you. Yeah, I loved learning about Darko. I'm excited to know
Thank you.
I mean, I've heard about it.
Thanks for listening.
Whispering, so.
Thanks for listening, everyone out there, too, whoever's listening to this podcast. Yeah, I'll just say Facebook, Denver Artists for Rent Control. It's that easy, and denverartistsforrentcontrol.com. But there's also Colorado Homes for All, Denver Homeless Out Loud, Colorado Coalition for the Homeless. We're engaged with all those organizations, and they all have lots of resources to share information. And you can join us on our Facebook page.
Great. I will be.
And tell us more about, attainable space options that you know about. And so, I want to hear about this.
Great. Yeah. So Patreon, I just sort of jumped on that. So as Zack mentioned, I write zines. I'm also a performance artist, and I do mixed media painting, and I dabble in installation and belly dance and immersive theater. I taught theater improv for over a decade with a nonprofit. So I've done a lot of different things. And when you were reading that article, the get a real job, I hear that a lot. And I'm like, this is my real job.
Right, yeah.
This is what I'm doing with my life. This is
It's your life work.
how I'm choosing to make a living. And I have a very fortunate circumstance in that, my parents really took care of me, got me through college. I have an art history degree, and my husband does pretty well. So, but I want to be independently wealthy outside of that relationship. So that's given me a cushion, and now I'm ready to be fiscally responsible for myself. And Patreon has been a great option. So I checked it. I'd known about it for a while. It was originally put together for creators of online media, so podcasts, vlogs, Twitch streamers, YouTube creators, art comics that were coming out weekly.
Oh, nice.
And so for a digital marketplace, but people who maybe weren't getting revenue for this beautiful gift that they were putting out monthly, weekly, so forth. And it's since exploded to include a lot of different people. I've heard that rumor that Patreon as a company maybe isn't having a great time, but I haven't looked into that. For me, I just ran a campaign.
So it's a free thing?
Yeah, so anyone can go on and set it up. The way they take a cut of what you bring in. So you offer, as an artist, I offer perks to my community, which right now I'm just using it to kind of have subscriptions of my zines. I have 2 zines. The first is 52 Feathers, and it comes out weekly. So every week
nice.
I'm doing all the
That's
art
impressive.
and all the writing, and I research a different bird, and I look at their mythology and their medicine and their energy and how they've influenced my own life and story.
Oh, wow. That's
And share
cool.
that, hey, look, let's look at crow and all of the different gods and goddesses that are sacred to the crow, and how to bring that into your own life and
I
pay
love
attention.
that.
And so I'm on week 44 or something, so I've written 44 of these zines.
Wow.
And then my other zine is called Thrift Witch, which I have right here. And it comes out every 6 weeks. And I do the art for that, if you want to see that one.
So this is produced, printed as well as online.
Well, I haven't released it online, so I do all of it digital, and then I mail these to people.
Oh,
so
far
if you
out. I
become
love
my
that.
patron on Patreon,
So it's tangible.
I will send you a physical thing that you get to interact with.
I love that it's
Every week.
tangible. I mean, as much as we need computers and how great it is to be able to go online and do so much of what we need to do, I can see you agree with it, and I know Zack is in the same place where we're just love being surrounded by the tangible, the ink on the page,
Embodiment, our bodies matter so much. I'm touching my face right now. It's oh, I exist.
Yeah.
We exist. We can touch each other and be human bodies in a space together. And so
Yes.
creating physical media speaks to that need of gather. to me. And
You know, and to be in the space with it makes it multi-dimensional.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
know, when it's on a flat screen, you're just basically looking at that. But I'm holding your zine in my hand, and this is gorgeous, by the way. I want to get on your mailing list.
Yeah.
I want to be a subscriber.
Yeah, I would love that. It's patreon.com/ magic with a K, magic_socks.
Very nice.
And that name came from a costume project I did coming on 6 years ago now when I was living in the Bay Area. But
because I have really thought that, you know, I don't really want to live in a world without books. I
Right.
mean, actual books with a spine on them, and where you smell the leather of the book cover and the ink on the page,
Yeah.
and that antique smell of the paper, and like,
And
and you
I'm-
see, but so our eyes are really very, very like the I don't know. I read somewhere somebody said there is no greater camera than the human eye.
Yeah, it's an amazing tool machine in that it can like
No greater
focus
lens.
in multiple distances, and it can see color, and it doesn't worry about the light the way a camera does, where it panics and can't focus long and short, and it can process all this information. It's just amazing what our
So, you know,
eyeballs can do.
Yeah.
why not thrive with that and be vibrant and bring so many things to life in a multi-dimensional way with your
Right.
dance on stage, with your zine
Mhm.
printed up. People can hold it in their hands. This is very colorful. It's really
Thanks.
wonderful. All these words. Oh my gosh, good job.
Thank you. Yeah, so I make, if you go on my website or Patreon, it's khirile.com, KHIRILEE.com.
Yeah.
Or on Patreon, you can find me there. I make all the paintings in real life, like in my studio, in my home. I create them with paper and paint and glue and found images, and then I photograph them, put them on my computer, do all the typing, take them to the print shop, print them pretty much on demand at this point, and then sell them on Etsy, which is another great resource for artists to reach an international community, and give them to my patrons on Patreon. So Patreon works in like a perk system, so it's like, I'm going to give you a perk because you believe in me as an artist. You think the arts are important, you like what I'm doing as an artist, and you can give me a certain amount of money. Almost like Kickstarter, but instead of a one-time contribution towards a project, it's an ongoing contribution to a person that you believe in, who's doing a project that maybe you care about. So that's my zine. So I have like a $1 tier and then all the way up to a $45 tier.
And so how long have you had that?
I set it up in like March or something and had like 4 patrons. Like my mother-in-law was on there and like a couple of my good friends. And then I ran this campaign and now I have 18 patrons, but I'm making over $200 a month right now.
Nice.
And they have a thing where you can like set up a special offer. So I offered stickers, which is like a really low cost
Nice.
thing. But people go crazy for stickers. I love stickers. Everyone loves stickers. And then
love
all these people
stickers.
were like, oh my gosh, I had no idea I could join in and know about you. And then it has like a blog feature. So I share about what I'm doing as an artist.
Fantastic. Do you guys know about Spectra Art Space down on South Broadway here?
Nope.
Spectra?
I just got an email from them.
I highly
I don't know
recommend
much
that you
about 'em.
wander in there and have a great chat with them and get to know. It's a cooperative and with a couple of leaders of it. Speaking of that word leader, so when it comes to Denver Artists for Rent Control, I'm the founder, but I'm also just the lead organizing member. Not the director, just the lead organizing member. And I wanted to say while we're on the air too, is that it is a completely unfunded, totally volunteer organization that has gotten a lot of support and participation through the years that we've been doing it, and also has had an impact along with another part of a greater coalition. But that I just think that we need to really have fun with the language, you know?
Yeah.
So if rather than be, a director, how about being a lead organizing member when it comes to something like this? But if instead of continuing to play with that word affordable, which gets really warped and misused, how about the word attainable, which no one was ever using until Denver Artists for Rent Control
Pioneers.
came out with that word. And then now I was really happy during the mayoral campaigning for Denver last spring, hearing so many of the candidates using that word.
Oh, wow.
That's great.
And I remember when Paul Cashman spoke at our first forum, and he was like, "That's a great word. It says so much more." He's like, "That's a great word. Do you mind if I use that word? Can I steal that word?" He goes, "Can I steal that word?" And I'm like, "Take it. Take it. Put it out there. Let's change the language. Let's change the language."
I've been playing with different titles because it's like, I'm an artist. And people are like, "Oh, what do you do?" Expecting me to be like, "I paint watercolor," or something. And I do so many different things that it's hard to hold someone's attention with our 30-second phone attention span these days to be like, "Oh, I paint and I write zines and I do theater and I'm..."
Right.
So I've been playing with like, okay, maybe I'm a creatrix, or maybe I'm a...
You're a creative. You're you're
And then I dabble in the sacred a lot, so I occasionally use the word art witch instead of artist, because it speaks to maybe a niche that I want to be participating in, and it can help people find me who are maybe more in alignment with my goals as playing with ritual and playing with the arts and being in nature, and so I don't know what the right name is yet. So I'm still exploring.
I like that though. Yeah, and I mean, it's good to not be able to label everything and categorize things, I mean...
I just hope my writing matters to the other writers, but I don't know if I'm a writer like they are. Because it's a spiritual path kind of thing, and I'm not religious at all.
Well...
But I'm, searching for reality like everyone. So
I can totally relate to that. It's only been recent, actually,
so I, too, have tried to think of, what's the right word for what I am.
What am I?
Yeah. Well, I think that the spiritual path is connected, for sure, to the creative path, the artistic path, and the activist path.
But so everything is so segregated.
All
all ideas and everything's are segregated anymore in, the zeitgeist of today. So
you're a really great writer. I really appreciate the pieces you've been bringing to the flash fiction
Thank you.
community. We have flash fiction going on once a month at the Mercury Cafe now.
I love the Mercury Cafe.
And it's not like I never write just totally ridiculous bullshit, too. I do that also. And a lot of it's humorous, and it isn't trying to make any point beyond just here's this weird thing.
Well, yeah, no, sometimes just I think it's very valid to just be doing the art for art's sake, and to be doing character sketches, even when you're doing a character sketch, and if it's humorous.
But with that pyramid, in effect, you still want to pay for your life somehow.
Yeah.
So I feel, because I don't want to stop being the writer or the creative, whatever, but I want to find a way to be that guy and still pay for the other boring, just eating and sleeping and shelter guy.
Yeah,
somehow that's my current kick, which the podcast is
I haven't
kind of
really been able to pay my survival needs through my art.
Might not be possible at all.
I haven't been able to do that.
I'm still after that.
I guess I haven't really tried that hard, but I mean, I've done a lot of things as a volunteer, and I'm a spoken word performance poet, and I've done a lot of creative things in this community. To just be expressing and generating a lot of really good energy and helping the culture thrive, not just for me, but for my comrades. But then, too, I've just made the art because it was what needed to be coming out of me at that moment. And I've written a lot of very poignant and spiritual things. I'm a yoga professional. That's been the bulk of my income in recent years, and a journalist, publicist. So, I mean, my writing skills have definitely been a big part of my survival income, but not my creative writing and my performance art. That's been something that I just save for me because I love to do it.
This is the real me, though, when it comes to that thing for
that's
me.
That's the real me.
The creative and that's the real me. And then there's I can interview somebody, I can, edit something.
Yeah.
That's the stuff that pays money, but the stuff that's dear to my heart or whatever, soul, whatever essence is not really making money. Yet.
I know. It's kind of a conundrum. It's kind of a dilemma that we face, and I haven't really resolved that one myself, but I'm starting to get paid a little something when my work's being published now, but I don't really know.
But I like the idea of batch together and form a collective and make things achieve things.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Which might include making money too, but just band together with all your fellows and make a louder gesture that way.
The times
I think the times are here for a lot of really cool stuff to just be emerging when it comes to cooperative living and communal kind of engagement, and also just taking it to the next place of being multi-dynamic, uncategorizable. You know, I mean, I think that this is, and we have so much talent. I don't know. I mean, I've been making art, you know, since the 80s, and I have not really ever come into this until recent years of just seeing so many chameleon type of artists who integrate a lot of different things that they do and are brilliant.
Yeah.
You know? Brilliant.
There are different kinds of artists, and
Oh
one
my
of the ones
God.
that I think feeds a community most are the integrators, the ones who can like take 6 different ideas and kind of coalesce them together and collaborate really beautifully and
Yeah.
create space and thoughts and creations and
But I mean, I know it's been going on. I mean, you think about the 60s, you know, it's sort of like a resurgence of the 60s in a big way
It's
right
always
now.
a cycle. It's always a
Yeah.
cycle. Like, I used to think Henry Alarm Clock was the first young upstart. And I was like, damn it, now Henry Alarm Clock's just this old man. Nobody cares about him anymore. And there's this other guy doing poetry, and you know what the hell? And then and Carson Reed started his scene page. And I saw all the flyers of you guys from the 60s, 70s, and
Oh,
80s.
yeah.
And you were all kind of young upstarts.
Yeah.
By the time I came around in the 90s, I was the young upstart, and I
Yeah.
was like the only young guy, and I thought, man, this scene's got to be shaken up, whatever, but
Right.
I was just part of a cycle.
Exactly. And now the 90s is vintage.
yeah,
Crazy.
time
Yeah.
keeps moving forward.
Oh my God,
Joe
what happened?
Strummer died, too.
I turned around a few times
Yeah.
in an elevator or in a revolving door, and now it's like, that's a vintage time.
Crazy.
But yeah, well, you know, one of the ways that I've just been dealing with my angst in recent years about the changes in Denver is to drive around the city and write little city vignettes, you know? And so sometimes I share that, like when I'm out at an event, like I'll go to an activist event and I'll share something that I wrote creatively that's a reflection of what I see taking place in our town. So I've got a few of these, but I don't want to share anything long with you right now because I know that we're all sharing the mic right now. But I wanted to just read for you Tumbleweed.
We're going to, there's Wadi Muhaisen,
Hello.
our next guest. And we'll probably need to get you set up with a...
I have to leave in a moment anyway,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
perhaps before you read
So-
that, I could just quickly shout out about
Yeah.
where I am
Sure.
one last time. So
Yeah.
again, I'm a zine writer and artist, and you can find me on Instagram. I post a lot at magic with a K _socks, or on my website khirilee.com, KHIRILEE. And
What
I'm-
about, can you tell us how to find your troupe that you're in that you told me about?
Oh yeah,
Oh, we
I'm
didn't talk
also
about
a
that.
belly dancer, and I'm perform with the Tribal Misfits, which we're at a Place to Be studio in Boulder. Come dance with us. We're all levels, all kinds, troupe, men, women, old, young, professional, hobbyist, whatever you want to do. You don't have to know how to belly dance. You can come play with us. And we're performing this Saturday at the Boulder Public Library at 1:30.
All
We have
right.
3 pieces that we're doing inspired by the sacred waters,
Nice.
which I'm really excited about.
Nice.
So I'm really looking forward to that. And yeah, those are kind of the big things. That's the biggest thing I have going on right now. I'll have some new projects starting in January, but sort of just kind of wrapping up the year with my zines. I have a couple left to write, and I'm starting a new cycle of Thrift Witch in December on the elements. So keep your
Oh,
eyes
on the
Alright.
elements, nice.
Yeah,
I
so
love
keep your
that.
eyes peeled for that.
Well, I'm really delighted that I got to, meet you and converse with you today. And I can hang around a little bit longer if you,
Yeah,
if you would
feel
like me
free.
to, Zach.
Yeah,
feel
but
free.
I'll probably pull out in about another half hour or so
All right.
myself. But
Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you for this opportunity, Zach.
Thanks
It's
so
great
much,
to be
Khiri.
here, and
It's a pleasure to
I'm
meet you.
Excited to see
Doing
where
great
this
stuff.
goes, and if you ever want me back on the show to talk about more about the arts, I'd be
Absolutely.
happy to. And it's so great to meet you. I'll definitely be
right.
checking out Darko.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks very much, and drive safely.
I will. Yeah, in the crazy Colorado weather.
Right. So long, Khiri. Thanks very much.
Is it? Yeah.
I was trying to find the name of the writer who wrote this article for the Denver Post that I was quoting. Gave you guys the title of it. I'm thinking it was Ray Rinaldi. He took a really big interest in this whole subject, but I'm not totally sure about that. I'm going to let you know, though, when I get my handle back on that later, Zach. I'll tell
Yeah,
you
thank
who it
you.
was, because that was a really great article. I'm going to send you the link to it.
I
so
appreciate
you can
it.
quote that again in the future on this show. Yeah.
Thank you, Khiri. Have a great
Yeah, let
evening.
me give you a hug.
It's nice to see
How are
you,
you,
Wadi.
man?
I'm doing well.
Good
How
to
are
see
you?
you. It was very cool.
Yeah, I'm glad you could make it. This is Khiri Lee, Wadi Muhaisen,
Friends on Facebook.
and Roseanna Frechette.
Hi, nice to meet you.
My pleasure.
I realized I didn't define what a zine was.
Oh, a zine would be an informal journal, a homemade magazine. Usually Xerox. I guess a lot of them are online anymore. Khiri's are handmade. And if you look at her website, KhiriLee.com, was it? KHIRILEE.com, you can find out all about her zines. Thanks again for coming to see us today. And we've got a new guest. It's Wadi Muhaisen. He's a lawyer. And we went to middle school together.
We did.
Merrill Middle School.
Been a long time, Zach.
Wait,
Good to see
where?
you.
What
Yeah.
school?
Merrill on Florida and Monroe.
South Denver.
Oh,
Yeah.
Florida and Monroe.
Zach and I both grew up in South Denver. We went to the same middle school.
Wow.
Sounds like you've got a cold, Wadi. Do you have a cold?
I think I'm okay.
I'm going to watch myself, though.
You've been here a long time in this town, watching it go through its many changes. You grew up here.
I have
Were
seen
you
the
born?
metamorphosis of Denver, yes.
Were you born in Denver?
I was.
Wow, awesomeness. I always love meeting someone who was born here.
Yeah,
I love Denver so much.
It's more and more rare.
It is more and more rare. Well, I've been here since 1976. So some of my younger friends that weren't born yet then are like, wait a minute, they can't do the math. They're like, how does that work?
Right.
How old were you anyway?
So I bet you guys could have an interesting conversation about rent control, potentially. Roseanna's here representing Denver Artists for Rent Control. I don't know if in your position you know much about the legalities of housing. I imagine more than I do.
Well,
But-
so I think so much of that is policy driven.
Yeah.
It's what they decide the legalities are. And it's a decision made by a municipality how they want to approach these things.
Well, that's the thing is that, it's been an issue in the United States for a long time because, we go through booms and busts as a nation. And somewhere in the 80s and 90s, it was just a time for a lot of development happening and a lot of developers being concerned about the tenant unions and the renters unions and just managing to get laws passed that would prohibit cities in pretty much 35 states have prohibitions on rent control right now. But I don't necessarily want to see Colorado have one big standard rent control where it's just like no one in this whole state can raise the rent more than this for the next however long. But I'm just thinking more that it would be really great if the municipalities themselves could at least have the handcuffs taken off of them when it comes to finding solutions to stabilizing rent within their own communities,
Yeah, I don't know as much about the topic as you do, but what I have read about it indicates that you are correct that a blanket rent control regime on a major city like Denver is just not tenable
Right.
and doesn't work very well. I mean, you need some local finessing of
Yeah.
these things, but
It should be like it should be malleable. I think they should be able to, maybe you freeze the escalation of rent for a year or a 9-month period of time, just so people can get situated and feel like they don't have to keep running from the tiger, because it's such an issue right now with the escalation of rents, with having no controls whatsoever. But the city, I'm very confident that our city of Denver, the city council, I've heard several of them talk about this, and they really are chomping at the bit for the day, some of them, when the handcuffs are taken off, where they actually have the right to come up with some better solutions to deal with a housing crisis.
the newly constituted city council, I think, is
Yeah, that one.
definitely a bigger chance.
Yes.
It's
Love
just that so much of the policies are driven by money and developers. I mean, that's just really the root of it.
Yeah.
It just takes the will of the municipality to assert themselves.
But it's just such an
their role to
irony.
do so.
It's an irony, though, that we have so many vacant luxury units right now, 20,000 in March, as of March, and that's very ironic because in a town it's clamoring to take care of its renting population and have enough attainable space for them, that wasn't exactly what we needed,
No, but I can tell you firsthand from clients that are investors and developers, it makes it look good in the inception of
Right.
of getting investors to invest in a future construction project. These units are going to sell for $750,000, $1.5 million,
Right.
and that excites investors.
They feel they can. The formula works for the developer, but it doesn't work for the population of
Right.
where it is. But I have to tell you this figure and just see what you think of this, because I just looked this up today. I've been tracking what the average rent is in Denver now for it's going on 4 years of running this organization and having such a great interest in it, and where it was around $1,200 a month for a reasonably sized unit, right around 800 square foot unit. It's now $1,600 a month.
Yikes.
And so it's really escalated a lot in a fairly short amount of time. But what's interesting to me in this formula that I know about, because really it's said to be true that you should only have to pay 30% of your income for your rent, so that you have the extra money that you need for things like gas and utilities and food.
How old
And
is
maybe
that
just a little bit of
statistic,
fun, So what this comes down to, you would have to be making to pay $1,673 a month for an 841 square foot apartment, which you could probably figure that a professional single person, that would be about the right amount of space. It's about how much your apartment is, right? About 800 square feet.
I don't have any idea.
I think it is. I've been there, and I know
one
I have got
bedroom.
one. My apartment. Yeah. So anyway, if you're working 40 hours a week, you would need to be being paid $32 an hour.
Right.
So this is an annual income of almost $67,000,
Which is
a year,
rare for an artist.
which is not the artist. So
Yeah.
and it's not even a lot of people in the service industry. We're just seeing a lot of families being displaced. So, I mean, a lot of us are not, now we've gone way beyond being concerned about just ourselves. You just look around you and you can see your fellow human beings are just like desperate and struggling, and you want to help and do something about it,
Yeah.
What is your expertise in your law career?
So I academically am an expert on international law, public international law, and I consult on foreign legal systems and just general international law. And that's my academic major interest. But practically I do civil litigation, criminal defense, civil rights law, various
So-
areas.
How do you feel about this federal ruling that took place with Jason Flores working on that class action settlement for the homeless population?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of litigation surrounding the laws that have been implemented by the city of Denver and other municipalities around the country in dealing with homeless issues. We have an explosion of homeless people in Denver and a lot of parts of the country, stemming from a lot of the stuff that you're talking about now with the. And we know what the causes are. There's some supply and demand things happening.
Yeah.
We have a lot of people moving into Denver. It's a huge influx. It's not slowing down. A lot of them are professionals that have a lot of money and are coming from parts of the country where the rents here seem reasonable.
Yeah.
Believe it or not.
I know.
I mean, if you're a tech worker from Silicon Valley and it's $1,600 for a central Denver apartment, that seems like a bargain. Anyway, but we've had our share of homeless people in Denver County for a long time. And I've been living in downtown for 10 years and central Denver for longer. And you have the category of homeless people. We know them, often by name. They definitely, a lot of them have mental health issues or substance abuse issues. They often don't know how to seek help. You have that category of homeless people. But more recently, in the last decade, we have a new influx of younger homeless that are more urban campers. Some of them are on an adventure. I've talked to them, and they view it as just kind of cool to live off the grid and all of
Hop
that.
in a train.
So there are different needs for different groups in the homeless population in Denver. And I can give you both sides of it. Having talked to a lot of people in the central business district, my office is in Larimer Square, so I know how they view things. I know how a lot of the residents in the condos in downtown Denver view things. There's a lot of progressive and liberal people downtown that care about the homeless, that agree with some of the things that Denver's done, the camping ban, for example, and all of that. And I think that if you want to solve the problem in a way that helps the homeless, but also assuages some of the concerns these other people have, you have to have everybody at the table. And I think that sometimes the solutions are just too abrupt to help to satisfy one demographic or interest group. And you have condo people that are pretty liberal that just had groups of people from other states just camping out right in front of their condo building and defecating and things like that. That usually progressive person is going to support the camping ban. So that's the kind of nuanced stuff that we have to look at instead of just saying, you're criminalizing homelessness or you're a fascist, you don't care about the homeless. We have to figure out a way where it's a collaboration among all the interested parties.
Well, I was pretty happy to find out that the federal judge ruled to approve the settlement agreement just for some very basic things, just to say that you can't take people's property without written notice, attached to their property.
Yeah, and I didn't even answer your question. I think it was a really good settlement.
Yeah.
And the attorneys that I've talked to that have been involved with it, as well as the people for the city, they all came together on it, I think, pretty well.
Yeah, this has been a long haul of working on this, and it really makes me happy to see that, we had the impact. And I mean, it's not everything that repealing the urban camping ban would bring to that population, but it is definitely a high integrity ruling.
Well, your friend who you mentioned got up in court and praised the city attorneys of Denver for the compromises they made. They sound very basic in retrospect, right? Just some notice and all of that.
It's just basic, You can't trash anybody's property that is defined as property in the settlement, but rather you got to store it for them, So the city was doing some pretty crazy stuff with that. But anyway, I'm hoping that we have a better winter for our homeless population than we have.
It's that time again.
It's been really brutal.
And long-term figure out better solutions. I mean, one sort of marketing thing that they've talked about, or using market forces, is to say, we'll incentivize developers on taxes and other things when they're developing a property.
Right.
If X percentage of the building is affordable housing or something like that. There's been some modest success in that.
I know,
way,
but the word affordable is a slippery bar of soap kind of a thing, because what that really means in a lot of those cases is that it needs to be affordable to those who can pay 60 to 80% of the average median income. So you're still not going to satisfy the income of people like Zack and myself, who have been dedicated artists all of our lives.
Well, I've often argued that the most screwed people in America are not the completely impoverished people or the wealthy. It's the person that makes just too much money to qualify for expanded Medicaid.
It's
or
so
just
true.
too much money to qualify for certain financial aid and loans.
I know.
And just too much money to qualify for business loans.
It's so true. You get really caught in this crazy spot as this kind of a stuck place where you can't get ahead, but you have to be really, I don't know.
Which is very ironic
the
because
formulas are weird.
You have the wealthy class and sort of people on the right that are like, you need to be incentivized to make your life better. But if you're impoverished and you do improve your life and make it a little bit better, you've taken yourself out of all of the safety nets and made it worse for yourself.
Exactly.
And that's one of the biggest problems we have in this country.
I totally agree with you. Do you have any commitments to helping that change somehow?
Well, I mean,
through your, you're obviously very educated with law, for instance.
Well, we all play a different role, and I incentivize the attorneys in my firm to do pro bono work of all types.
Thank you.
We commit to doing X minimum number of hours per year per attorney for everything like landlord-tenant stuff, civil rights stuff. I think it's the floor, not the ceiling, honestly. But I think that lasting change will happen with the political class.
All right.
We've actually achieved quite a bit in this country through litigation. But in the end, we have to have courageous politicians that are willing to change the status quo, because we can only litigate. When it comes to fundamental rights, we can pave new ways legally to expand those rights in some ways. But when it comes to day-to-day economic rights and things like that, and reversing the tide of unions are pretty much over with at this point, right? Like if you look at what's happened with the membership of unions in this country, it's plummeted quite a bit. And the largest percentage of union members we have now are federal employees. So in the private sector, compared to like 50 years ago, we almost have no union left in this country. And that started with Reagan and Thatcher.
Exactly. And that's where this
it's
whole...
an orchestrated thing. But the point is we have politicians that are undermining that sort of thing. And if they pass, the vast majority of legislation isn't based on fundamental rights. And for the listener, if something involves race or national origin, in many cases gender, more and more sexual orientation, and a municipality or a government entity passes a law that violates something like that, we as lawyers can go in and litigate that and try to expand through the common law of cases or strike down legislation that discriminates. But when it comes to something like zoning or rent control or affordable housing, those aren't deemed by the courts and the legal system to be fundamental issues. And so you can't litigate your way out of those. City councils and state legislatures and governors and to some degree the federal government has to step in and make decisions that will improve those things.
It's pretty much we need a sea change, across the globe on this thing about, and it affects everything we care about, the whole financialization of being human, But so Denver's housing crisis is just part of this really global crisis. And I love this when I read Leila Farha of the United Nations, and she attributed the whole problem to the financialization of housing, for which Paris, deemed the most expensive city in the world for housing, is taking aggressive rent stabilization actions just last summer. And, 35 of our U.S. states are currently having prohibition on rent control and dealing with this struggle themselves. But she was speaking from a voice, her voice was coming from London at the time when I read this, and I remember seeing a virtual spoof video that was a political satire on this very thing, where this couple was coming to look at a luxury condo in some high-rise in London, and it had never been lived in. And the realtor was joking with them about how they might be able to live in it if they bought it, but it really had never been lived in. And, it's just this whole comedy spoof about how much space is being trapped by the financialization while we have of the world, basically, just being human and alive.
Well, I think you have to take a step back. It's a bigger picture than that, if you want to be very macro about this. There was a time in the Western world, so-called, in the Western industrialized world, the U.S. and Western Europe, that the concept of everybody having housing and food and healthcare and all that was a completely normal concept. The notion that government could do good for the common good and for the populace. When neoliberalism globally started in the 70s and 80s, and they started really expanding that around the world, it suddenly has become a negative thing. That the government's viewed as negative in many ways, and the government helping people with housing or healthcare and all that, that's viewed as a negative thing now in most of the Western world. It's a very reactionary thing, and so it's a philosophical approach to government.
Oh yeah, because
hugely
people feel restricted. They feel like the government's being restrictive.
No, it's the 80s with the Starve the Beast and like we shouldn't put money towards handouts, and they just started framing things differently. So if you're someone now who advocates, for example, government intervention to help people in many facets, you would have been a Republican in the 1950s. So what's happened is if you're liberal now in mainstream politics, you're basically you'd have been in the middle in the 1950s. And now you're considered a radical and you're a socialist and all of that.
Right.
Because
Bingo.
the right's moved way further right and the left has moved to the middle in mainstream politics. So when you hear Bernie Sanders say something that just shocks the media, he's advocating for things that were pretty normal in the 50s.
Yeah.
That even Republicans wouldn't. Look at the GOP platform for some of the conventions in the 50s. And you probably have seen those memes online where they
I
will
need
put
to
up
go
a
and
flyer.
look at one of those.
We'll put up a flyer from the convention that Eisenhower was nominated in, and what was advocated for by the GOP. And the Republicans of today would view that as the most radical socialist agenda. So the conversation's changed. Everything's been pushed.
Well, tell us a few things that would be advocated for in the 50s.
I'm gonna
Just
see if-
bring us back like we're,
Yeah, I'm gonna
like
see
we're
if I can
watching
pull
an
one
old
up.
TV set from the
I
50s here.
believe you.
No, it'd be fun to read it to you if I could pull it up.
Yeah, if you can pull it up. I'm real curious too. And it might take you a moment to want to like go there, answer this, but because you were born here and you've stayed here, and obviously see what's going on in this town. I don't know if you would agree with me that there is quite a lot of irresponsible, uncontrolled growth, reckless development, and outrageously escalating rents that are displacing our population at a pretty high speed. So that's a mouthful.
It is. I
but-
mean, there's no doubt about the fact that all of what you're saying is happening. And it's not a surprise. Like if you look at other Denvers that were a little bit ahead of us on this gentrification, we know what's going to happen. The math is there for it.
It is a boom town forever, and it is a pioneer town that had to be developed in waves.
Well, it depends
so
when you're
that's all
talking
comes
about, right?
with it.
So
But-
in the 80s, we had a major crash because of how energy dependent the economy was. And you could have bought blocks and blocks of property in Lodo for a song. That was just in the 80s.
Yeah.
I mean,
We
Zach,
gotta-
when you and I met,
Yeah.
the economy was very weak here.
I wasn't paying attention to the economy
I didn't
at
think
that
you
time,
were.
but I remember there was an influx of Californians, and people were freaking out about how the Californians were
90s.
stealing all
Yeah.
the
I remember
and
that.
then there was the whole thing when
Here's
Dick
Lee
Lamb was
Molloy.
in office.
Just walked in from the International Cannabis Church of Cannabis.
Awesome.
I don't know if there's room to...
I can
share a
actually,
mic or if-
or I could segue. There is another mic here, right here.
Oh,
I just
okay.
need a chair.
But I did find that platform, if you
Pull
want to hear
yourself,
it.
pull
Yeah,
yourself
I
up
wanna
a
hear
chair
it.
if you get a chance, Lee.
Yeah, there's
so-
probably a chair right there.
There's plenty of chairs. We can even...
And Wadi's reading from Eisenhower's platform?
So this is the 1956 Republican platform.
Okay.
Okay, let's hear it.
Protect Social Security.
No.
Contrast
Nice.
that to what
Yeah.
Wow,
they would like
yeah.
to do Social Security now.
Oh my God.
Expand minimum wage.
Yeah.
Strengthen labor laws so workers can easily
Time
join a
machine.
union.
Oh wow.
Yeah. it's-
Fantastic.
Well, but that's my point, is that
I hear
those
ya.
things were considered pretty mainstream
Wow.
for the Republican Party.
Yeah. So, well, what would you like to see happen in this town that could be an improvement with, a more, well, we do have a really great city council shaping up right now, I feel like. And so what would be your personal hopes for this town that you grew up in and love?
Well, the new city council is taking some bold actions, even surprising themselves. I don't know if you
Yes.
heard about
Yes.
Councilwoman DeBaca's
Yes.
proposal to disinvest from
Yes.
the private correctional facilities,
Absolutely.
the halfway houses.
Yep.
She said, and she's my representative, and she said that, my city councilwoman, she said that she didn't expect a single second vote on that.
Yeah.
And then on the second reading, the majority voted for it.
Yeah.
So they're actually scrambling to comply with that now.
Yeah.
I don't know, it sounds cliche, but I think that to solve these problems, you have to incentivize everybody involved. Like, we can't go too far on what the city council does, because it'll just cause an eventual backlash by the developers who have a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
We need to figure out a middle ground, and I don't mean to sound compromising on human rights or on the right to have affordable rent.
Mm-hmm.
But there is some good that comes from the incentive of a developer to fill in parking lots, right? And we
Yeah.
can all agree that we don't want these empty lots all over central Denver. We like having density. We like
Yeah.
having people living together. There's a lot of good ramifications about people that live in close proximity. They're more tolerant. They're less racist. They're less homophobic. There's so many good things that come from density. But the question remains, how do we have everybody participate in that and share in that? And I think that, I'm not an expert on this by any means, but I think the developers have to be incentivized to provide more affordable housing and really affordable housing, and firmly incentivized. So if we start with incentivizing them to include like a lot more affordable units in all the construction, give them a tax break and all that, see how that goes, ratchet it up more than it is now, and see how that goes. And if that doesn't work, then the city does have to draw up more lines. And where those are, I think people smarter than me on the subject have to figure that out. But it's got to be a partnership, I think.
I agree. Thank you. You said that really well, actually. I totally agree with
Thanks.
you. Yeah, and I do think that there have been a lot of really positive things that have come out of this growth burst that this boom, this unprecedented
Well, we talk
boom.
about rents and we talk about
Yeah.
traffic, right?
Yeah,
But I
but
think
I mean, there have been some good developments too.
culture's
for
better,
sure.
dining options are better, diversity is getting a little bit better. We got a long way to go in
But
Denver.
it's just when you see the areas of our town, though, that are really sabotaged and that's really gone just really bananas bonkers with like overdevelopment, like just really crazy looking stuff that's enormous and just
Yes, I agree
that
with
to
you
me
100%.
is planning.
Well, and,
you know,
and that's
not
on the
planning.
city.
Yeah, it's
Like
on
the
the city.
slot homes and all of that
The
they
city-
started putting in the north side, and it's awful. And the city does have a fiduciary duty to us as Denverites to prevent that sort of thing from happening.
Well, Paul Cashman told me recently, and I called him back to make sure I was getting this right. Denver does not have a city planner right now. We don't have one.
I didn't know that.
So I'm still trying to wrap my brain around what to do with that, but I will be asking some questions on that score at a city council
They
meeting
did ban
soon.
the slot homes, by the way, to be fair.
Yeah, that was
Even the city
good.
council before this did.
Yeah.
Because they're just awful.
No, the city council has really done some great things. And in fact, as much as I was not really wanting Hancock to come back as our mayor, some of the things that have come out of his time in office, I can agree with, have been very helpful to our community. So
That's good to
but
know.
yeah, I mean, I do
right.
feel that there's been a few helpful things, but I'm really, I've gotten more upset than not over I don't know. Well,
Well,
I've talked
let-
a lot about it already in this.
Let me introduce you all to Lee Molloy from the International Church of Cannabis. He's one of the founders, and he's founded a religious philosophy or spiritual maintenance philosophy, perhaps, called elevationism. He's here to talk about that. And Roseanna Frechette is representing Denver Artists for Rent Control, and Wadi Muhaisen, an old friend of mine, is a lawyer. So you guys can all interact and talk about cannabis and rent and elevationism. Lee, how's your day going today?
Very well, thanks. Got a few visitors to the church, even though it's been a little bit snowy out. But yeah,
That's good.
I wouldn't mind hearing the summary of elevationism. It's not familiar.
Let's hear about that.
Okay, elevationism is a radically inclusive philosophy or religion that allows people from different backgrounds, no matter whether they're, come from a Jewish background, or Muslim background, or a Christian background, it doesn't matter, to come together under the idea that cannabis can be used as in a ritual and mindful way to inspire and help in one's spiritual life and one's spiritual journey. So that's pretty much a summary, I think.
It's a pretty universalist approach,
Yeah.
spiritualism.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because I think along with all the things we've been saying in this podcast about an evolving people, I mean, taking things to a new level in some ways. There's a spiritual hungering right now, I think, for a lot of folks out there that, because human beings are spiritual by nature, and if you were raised in a tradition that you no longer jive with, and you're kind of hanging out there, so maybe you're helping, satisfy that for a lot of people by opening up a new doorway for them.
Yeah, I mean, organized religion as we know it was, really founded by the idea of Emperor Constantine when he's pushing the Holy Roman Emperor and Church through Northern Africa, through Europe and whatever. And over using Christianity at the time to overrun local religions, local pagan spiritual religions and ideas, to create this one sort of organized empire. And before that, there really wasn't that much organization. So really what we're doing is saying you can go back to a time before a bunch of perverts and rapists took over your spirituality and your journey.
Yes.
Like before it was politicized and made a tool of empire.
Yeah,
Well, yeah, because shamanism predates organized religion.
by a long time.
So we look at that in the. I'm a yoga professional also, and we look at that in the yoga, on the yoga path. How we're even anything can become sort of dogmatic when it gets too organized, and the politics of organization come into it. But if you go back far enough, you see that the tribal spiritual leader would have the way to show people deeper into themselves through whatever the practices.
Yeah, and we see a lot of, and we do see this in cannabis as well. I mean, like you can go back 3,000 years in India, and you'll find Badu using what they call bhang, which is basically a cannabis mix. It can be mixed into drinks or into food for holy holidays and whatever, and they're using it in part of their ceremonies. And this has been going on for 3,000 years. You'll also find it amongst ancient Egyptians, amongst Germans, the pagan German religions. You only have to go back to like 500 BC, and you'll find cannabis being used in those religions. So in terms of like spirituality through cannabis use, it's not really a new idea.
No.
What we've done is we've said, if you want to step outside of this stamp that was placed on you at birth that said you have to be a Christian or whatever it was you were born into, and you find yourself looking for more or something different, come on by and learn something different, and this might help you out. Because really what we're trying to do is break down barriers between people.
Sounds like a worthy mission.
Well, in that history of cannabis being a spiritual tool, you might say, I guess.
Yep.
When did it break down that it became illegal? I mean, in the history of it.
Hearst, wasn't it Hearst?
I mean, there is this kind of conspiracy theory idea that Hearst, some put a kibosh on the cannabis or hemp industry because he owned the paper industry and like that. So, but there seems to be a
there we go, back to
odd
Money.
conspiracy
Money.
nonsense involved there.
There was also a big shift, at least in the American legal system, against all sorts of controlled substances, quote unquote, under Nixon, for example. He viewed it as a way, in his Justice Department, viewed the banning of most substances as a way to undermine the liberal left or the hippies or the anti-war movement. And a lot of people don't realize this, but for much of the early part of the 20th century, cocaine, heroin, all of those were legal. And they weren't put on schedules the way they are now in modern times. And we have some evidence from the Nixon administration that they wanted these put on Schedule 1 to undermine the anti-war movement. And I think for many decades, researchers have wondered, okay, we get the heroin part. Why is marijuana on the Schedule 1 list? And just for the listeners, Schedule 1 means that there's no medical value whatsoever of the substance. And so now it's still still federally banned. It's still on Schedule 1, and even though several states and District of Columbia have legalized cannabis.
Well, I think we answered the question there a little bit when you look at Nixon railing against the hippie movement at the time, saying why are we putting marijuana on there, and it was going back to what I was just saying in a little bit, was that marijuana itself helps you to break down walls of programming and coding, if you like, that's been put into you. So you have to start asking questions about, is this correct? Is this information I've been getting real? And I think that is a threat, and has been a threat to organised religion and organised government as well. And we can see that.
So how has the legalization of cannabis in Denver affected your law practice, if at all?
Well, I mean, the main way it's changed my law practice is that when I started doing criminal defense for several years, I had a lot of marijuana cases.
Mm-hmm.
It seems ridiculous that they would channel their resources to prosecuting marijuana crimes, but it did make them money. I mean, you paid fines and all of that. So the biggest change is that aside from my federal cases, I don't have marijuana cases anymore, and I'm very happy to lose that business. Full disclosure, I don't consume marijuana. It just doesn't work for me. But I've always advocated for the legalization of marijuana. And I've always thought the war on drugs generally was asinine and made no fiscal sense. I think no matter what way you approach it, right wing, left wing, center, there's reasons why the war on drugs is a failure. If you're a fiscal conservative, it's a complete catastrophe of resources that the DEA and in the states. There's been some research recently about how it's affected crime in general, and I think that's a work in progress. And before I came over, I looked some of it up. In states where medical marijuana has been legalized, they've pretty much accepted that there's been a drop in crime in those states. In the states where recreational has been legalized, I would say it's too soon to tell, but there's some research that, at least Hickenlooper argued, crime has gone up since we legalized marijuana recreationally. If you look at the data, though, it's really absurd because it's more correlational. It's more like homicides have gone up in Sioux City when ice cream sales go up or something like that. Violent and property crime have gone up in Denver in the last few years, and that's reversed a long descent. And it correlates with marijuana becoming legal recreationally. But there's absolutely no evidence that there's any connection there.
Yeah, it doesn't seem
I mean, we have a lot of people moving here. Population has increased.
It's just that the population has increased.
Yeah,
That's the one big thing about marijuana becoming legal here recreationally that I really have noticed almost instantly when it happened was there is a correlation between that and this boom that we've been talking about in this show. This like outrageously like mushroom-like explosion of a development boom because so many new people flowing into the state, plus the resources.
Right. Makes sense.
You know, the financial resources.
Yeah. I mean, again, crime has gone up in Denver, but it's also gone up in Chicago, St. Louis, Baltimore, New Orleans, and Kansas City in the same categories, and none of them have legal recreational marijuana. So it's absurd to say that legalized marijuana has caused an increase in violent crime.
Right.
And anybody who actually understands marijuana knows that's certainly not true.
Yeah.
Yeah, that Hickenlooper.
It's not going to cause you to be violent.
Some kind of grudge.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. I mean, it's
trying to stay within the lines, probably to be accepted by some higher up. Like, oh, he didn't advocate marijuana, you know. I'm just theorizing.
And so what is your name again?
Lee.
Lee. So Lee, have you lived in Denver for very long, or did you?
A few years.
A few years.
Yeah.
What do you like?
So I'm a newcomer to this.
What do you like the most about Denver?
I love it when people try and do English accents at me. Obviously, that's always fun. But I don't get to go out that much, to be honest with you, because I'm mostly at my church, and then I live 2 blocks away, and I go back and forth. So, and I spend 7 days a week doing that. But yeah, I like that. It's a nice place, it's a nice town. It's just, it seems to be a little bit, I come from bigger places, so it seems a little small sometimes. But yeah.
Are you from the UK in London, or?
Yeah.
What's the current cannabis situation in the UK?
It's not legal
Still?
Yeah.
Is it essentially decriminalized, though? Are they enforcing that?
They don't really enforce it. It's kind of like a Cyprus type thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it's technically not legal in the Netherlands.
Right.
Denver actually was the first city in the whole world that actually legalized it.
Yeah.
Oh.
It's decriminalized in the Netherlands. It's not legal.
Yeah.
Wait, you mean when we legalized medical marijuana, we were the first city, or when it's
Both.
recreational, it's the whole state?
Right, both. So when we legalized Colorado, I should have said.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Sorry.
Yeah. Huh. So your church is located at is it the one on Logan?
It's on the corner of Dakota and Logan.
Yeah, that's a great old church.
Yeah,
You
it
should
is.
look inside. I know you're
Yeah.
allergic to pot smoke, but it's beautifully decorated
Yeah, I
on
saw
the interior.
photos of the interior, and it was pretty stunning.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Do you have like musical concerts and all kinds of different events that go on there?
Yeah, we have different stuff there, you know. We have musicians play every week during our services on Sundays. We have different musicians often, regularly.
We should probably talk about the difficulties in attaining entry, since we're talking about the church, and we probably don't want people to just show up on Sunday,
True,
right?
true, yeah. I mean, legally, again, we're on very legal grey terms, so it's hard to know. The way we've kind of made it work so far, and, I spent a couple of years going through the courts, so this is where we're at. Is that you have to be invited to attend the church service on a Sunday evening personally by an email on an email list, so that you can actually sign up at our website, which is elevationists.org or internationalchurchofcannabis.com. It's very easy to Google and find it. You answer a few questions, and then you have to go through like a process of confirming a couple of emails, and it's kind of annoying, but it really doesn't take very long, and then you get sent email invitations to attend services, and that's how we've kind of made it so we're able to be a sort of community church and have people come in, but still make it a private event type thing.
Yeah, just a couple little hoops you got to jump through. I hosted a discussion group in the basement of ICC, and I had to go through the same thing. I had to create a private event page and invite people I wanted to attend. I couldn't just tell people, show up at 7. So it puts a little bit of a hitch in the get along, but it's worth it. It's beautifully decorated on the inside. And I would encourage you, I don't know how I could do this. I could encourage you all to look for the Facebook page called Return of the Guest List Series. Actually, this isn't even live, so no one's going to hear this. But when the time comes, when it gets broadcast, look for that Facebook page. It'll probably be a new one. And sign up, send me an email, and I'll invite you to the next discussion group. There's another one happening on Tuesday, tomorrow evening, but you're not going to hear it, so this will be in the future. So never mind all that. And let's see. Wadi, were you ever a King Diamond fan? I know we used to be heavy metal fans.
Merciful Fate.
Yeah, were you ever a fan of
Yeah,
his?
of course.
I never was. I noticed he's in town, though, or he's
Yeah.
coming to town,
Yeah,
to the Fillmore.
you have these old time hard rock artists that will resurface on these tours, but if you'll notice, for all of them, they're usually in smaller venues now. I think there's been a trend in rock and roll generally, and hard rock. It's actually kind of on the decline, quite honestly. If you look at the interest in rock and roll and music, there was it started with disco, and then the number of people that like rock and roll and heavy metal kind of lessened, and then you had the big electronic music one that's kind of still going, 90s, 2000s, and now, and I think a lot of millennials and Gen Z people they're into electronic music and very, very narrow type of
it's
of
hard to
genres.
find an artist anymore, isn't it? I mean, there's like artists.
But if the old 60s and 70s rockers come around, their fans now have a lot of money, and they will go and fill up Mile High Stadium to watch the Rolling Stones and buy the shirts and spend $200 a ticket. But when they retire from going to the concerts, and who are the next rock bands, and it's not looking good. Demographically, it's also, they're not reaching ethnic groups, they're not reaching females either. I read some data where in the 60s and 70s, a larger percentage of rock and roll fans were females, and now it's dwindled to single digits. So if you go to some of the heavy metal shows now, like if they can go to these small venues or the Fillmore or whatever, it's just a bunch of males, a bunch of white males.
Wow,
actually.
no fun in that.
Yeah.
Were you ever a Merciful Fate fan, Lee? King Diamond? You had a
No.
heavy metal phase, right?
Yeah, not those
Did you ever
particularly.
read Kerrang?
I did read
Yeah.
Kerrang a few times. Yeah,
Yeah.
I had a few, definitely had issues of that, I should say. Yeah.
So many important hard rock bands from the UK.
Yeah.
But I think like one of the things you're saying there, one of the things that is happening though, although these bands are. No, I mean obviously there are as you said, the Rolling Stones and like U2 and Guns N' Roses that are still putting on these mega stadium shows.
Yeah.
But there are also these guys who are playing sort of mid-level places now. They're coming back to smaller places, and the way they're making their money, it's all on the meet and greet tickets. So like you pay $25 to get in, but you pay $150 to sit down and shake hands and have them
Interesting.
say
Yeah.
hello to you.
Yeah.
You know? And that's
Wow.
how they're doing it now.
What an Instagram way to
Yeah.
monetize touring.
It's a weird realization I've had in the last maybe 10 or 15 years, so it's not really new, but like that a lot of these people just tour all the time.
Mm-hmm.
What a grueling existence, and that's what they signed up for. That's why we know who they are.
And they don't make as much money from the album sales because
Yeah.
of, I mean, ask any musical artist that has stuff on Spotify. They're not making money hand over fist on that sort of method.
Seriously.
I am going to bow out of this conversation in order to avoid a parking ticket.
Oh, I understand. Well, thanks for coming, Roseanna. You've been a great part of this first episode.
You're so welcome, and I just want to share one little creative thing
By
with
all
you
means.
on my way out as a sort of a parting thought, because my whole activist work and my place in the bohemian community in Denver for so many years, I care really greatly about the quality and character of our town. But I love that Denver has always been sort of gritty, edgy, intriguing, and pioneer-like. And so in driving around the city, I've been writing little city vignettes to deal with how I perceive the changes. This is called Tumbleweed. As I watch friends roll away on road trips, some planning to return, some not sure if they will, I find it strangely comforting when a massive tumbleweed crosses my path on a busy Denver street, midweek, midday, today.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you
nice.
for listening. Thank you for listening. Thank you for having me, Zack.
Absolutely. Thank you for coming,
Gratitude
Roseanna.
to the Mutiny Information Cafe. Love this place. And thank you so much to our technician
Douglas.
here. Yes, helping us. So we'll look forward to hearing this when it's up on the Mutiny Information Cafe's
Or wherever
website.
it ends up. And it won't be too long, maybe a week. And I'll let you know for sure.
Great to meet the fellow conversationalist here.
Nice to meet you.
Thank
Nice
you.
to meet you.
Yeah.
Hope you don't get a ticket.
Yep.
I'll be fine.
All right.
I know just about how much I can push it.
Yeah.
All right, good.
I'm like, yeah, I got to get out there now. But you guys continue the conversation.
We've got about
and,
10
have
minutes.
fun.
I brought some conversation starters. Unless you guys can think of anything just comes to you. I got this sheet here. Ask the... Let's see. What are you most thankful for? Well, it's Halloween coming up. What are you going to wear? Are you going to dress up for Halloween? Do you have any plans for Halloween, which is in the next few days? Either one of you, anyone, even Douglas.
Speaking of pre-Christian religions, right?
Yeah, exactly. Samhain, Samhain.
Hallows Eve.
Yeah.
All Hallows Eve. Yeah, no, I came up with a fun costume actually. And I took one of our High Priest t-shirts, which has got a little dog collar on here.
Oh.
And
And it says High Priest in silver cursive, right?
yeah, but you can just see the dog collar because I got a V-neck sweater,
Oh.
right? Which is kind of a bit dorky looking. And a badge here that says Psalm 23,
All right.
right? And then it's a big like wolf head, like mask
Wow.
thing.
Awesome. Is Psalm 23 where you shall use all the herb of the land? Is that the one that is?
No,
Which one is Psalm 23?
it's the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want.
Oh,
He
okay.
maketh me to lie down in green
All
pastures.
right. Pardon me,
That
God.
So it's the whole thing about the Psalm of David. You know, it's one of David's psalms, and being the shepherd. So that makes me a sheep or a wolf in sheep's
Uh-huh.
clothing. Yeah,
Wow.
That's
It was-
perfect.
it was-
That's a very good idea.
yeah. So that was what I did. So ready to go with that one. Yay! And I didn't even
think
have
I
to
have-
leave the house because I already had the wolf's hat for some weird reason.
Oh, what are you going to do?
Huh?
Where are you going to go?
I don't know. I might just go to work. I
Walk
don't know.
around the block?
Yeah, who knows?
I like that idea. Just go to work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
and carry on. What about you,
even
Zach?
tell
What are you
me.
doing for Halloween?
Well, I think I have Toastmasters on that very day. Is Halloween on a Thursday?
It is.
So I'll probably just dress up kind of like in a mod wear. Like I'll wear a fedora and suspenders and a tie, and not very different from what I'm wearing.
Zach,
right
you've been
now.
asking us all
But
the
I
questions.
thought I would wear Hulk hands. If anyone knows where I can get a pair of Hulk hands, that'd be great. Like the button-down suit guy, and he's wearing Hulk hands, you know.
Wizard's Chest isn't too far
Oh,
from
that's
here.
Yeah.
not a bad idea.
An original Denver company.
Hmm. Now, how about you? Are you going to go to court in a costume or anything?
You know, I've always wondered if I could ever pull off doing the barrister wig and robe and just walk into court and carry on.
Good idea.
Well, I think I'd get away with it with
You
most
should
Denver
be able
judges.
to, yeah. I mean, unless it was just considered improper.
Years ago in Arapahoe County in the 90s, there was a Nigerian lawyer he practiced in Nigeria. He moved to the States and he got admitted here. There was one Arapahoe County judge that let him come into court in essentially the Nigerian robe
Oh, wow.
that lawyers wear. And I haven't heard of anything since, but thought that was pretty interesting.
That's a great precedent.
So Zach, you're asking us all the questions. Why don't you give us a summary of what's been going on for you? Because you do so many different things.
Oh.
Are you writing?
Yeah,
I've enjoyed a couple of your novels in the past.
I
but-
appreciate that, Wadi. I really do. I'm working on a collection of short stories, and I think it's done.
So fiction, short stories?
Fictional short stories, but there are also a bunch of fictional shorts and flash fiction even, which are like 1 to 2 page fiction shorts, and I think 7 to 10 autobiographical pieces that are fictionalized.
Yeah, I felt what I've read of your stuff in the past was very autobiographical.
It's true.
I started questioning how much of it was fictitious, honestly.
Yeah, I'd say it's mostly not fictional whatsoever, but I've never been able to qualify as creative nonfiction. When I submit to the creative nonfiction guys, they're like, this is fiction.
A lot of Denver
And
references?
when I submit to the fiction, they're like, this is not fiction enough.
Oh.
Yeah, a lot of Denver
Because you
references.
did do a lot of Denver references before, which is fun.
The new trip is, you may remember, Wadi, because we went to middle school together. You might remember that I was in a car accident at age 11.
Yeah.
My forehead was slightly misshapen. And I just had a plastic surgery operation to normalize my forehead.
Wow.
Which was a way more big deal for me than probably the reader. But there were enough exciting events in my diary of that leading up to the operation and the aftermath of the operation that I think I got 7 to 10 good short pieces that are all going to be interspersed with my fiction and my flash pieces in this new short story collection, which I think is a real good offering. But God, I don't even know. And I was talking to Roseanna and Khiri in the beginning of the podcast about how, like, what does it take to really qualify anymore as a saleable artist, writer or artist or musician, and I'm really not sure where I fit in that algebra anymore, but my hopes are high, and that's one thing. And then I'm trying to do this podcast, and I've been hosting discussion groups at the International Church of Cannabis. They've been on hiatus for a long time, but we're starting up again tomorrow evening. And that's what I've been doing.
So what made you start this podcast, and what are your hopes for it?
It's an interesting story. How much time do we have? I
4
got
minutes.
time. All right, so Tom Green, you know who Tom Green is? I didn't like that guy when I first became aware of him in the 80s, maybe the late 80s.
He was on MTV?
Yeah,
that Tom Green? The
Tom
Canadian
Green.
guy?
He was just kind of this smart-ass prankster, and at the time I thought, that's not funny. How does he get away with fame for just being this prankster smartass? But I've changed my mind, and I was about 40 years old, and I came to this thing called Tom Green Live in 2003, where this guy is so conditioned by having once been this famous guy that even though he has no career anymore, he sees no way to behave but to host a talk show. So he starts hosting a talk show in the basement of his home in Brentwood, I want to say, some suburban Californian home. And he's got some famous friends from his old period of fame, so like Norm Macdonald, Flavor Flav. He's got some connections, but then he's also got like a donut shop down the street. He has people come from the donut shop. All these things have been removed from YouTube now, except for the ones with Norm Macdonald. But I came upon this trove of Tom Green videos, and I thought, what a great thing that this guy has transformed from being this loudmouth upstart into like this deferential talk show host. And so that was the seed of the idea. I wanted to transform into this deferential talk show host after being this loudmouth upstart. And I've required this whole prosthesis to become a more participatory person, of like a recording studio and a microphone. And I thought there was going to be a headset, but there wasn't.
Evolution's a good thing.
And I'm trying to be more participatory and like be the host of a panel of voices in this prosthetic attempt at being participatory here in this basement.
Interesting.
Cool.
And I've got high hopes for it. And the first episode went really well, and thanks to you both for coming.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
And you both did a great job. And thank you, Douglas, for manning the wheels of steel. It looks like we're just about ready to wrap up. So let me just find the closing credits here. And we'll go out on the melodic note. Thanks for coming, everybody. It's been a fine episode. It's Camp Elasticity, the podcast. We'll be back again in about a month, and this first episode would be airing in about a week. Today is October 28th. So long.
Yay.
Cool.